15,000 years ago, you're a hunter-gatherer somewhere across Eurasia. Every single day follows the same brutal rhythm. Wake up, try not to die, find food, try not to die again, sleep. And then one night, sitting around your fire in the middle of absolute nowhere, you hear something moving in the darkness just beyond where the light reaches. You go completely still. Two yellow eyes blink at you from the shadows. Now, just about every animal in that situation would either bolt or take your face off, but this one does neither. It just stays there, watching you, and something about it stops you from reaching for your spear. That moment is probably where the entire story of dogs begins. And here's the thing about that story. The way wolves actually became dogs is one of the most bizarre, fascinating, and genuinely funny chapters in all of natural history, because it didn't unfold the way most people imagine. Humans didn't exactly sit down and plan this out. There was no ancient man who thought, you know what sounds like a great idea? Domesticating an apex predator and turning it into something that sleeps on my pillow and emotionally unravels when I leave the room for 30 seconds. No, the whole thing was far messier than that. First, let's get one thing straight. Dogs are not some separate species that existed out there in the wild on their own. Biologically speaking, they are a domesticated subspecies of the gray wolf, Canis lupus familiaris. Every dog that has ever lived, from the imposing German Shepherd to the frankly embarrassing Chihuahua, is descended from wolves. Which means that at some point, wolves and humans had a conversation that went about as differently as it possibly could have. But when exactly did all of this happen? Scientists have been arguing about it for decades, and honestly, the argument is ongoing. The best current estimate places dog domestication somewhere between 15,000 and 40,000 years ago, which is an enormous window, and the reason it's so wide is that the archaeological record is genuinely messy. DNA doesn't lie, but it does get complicated, and ancient bones don't come with labels. What we do know with confidence is this dogs were the first animal humans ever domesticated. Not cows, not horses, not goats. Dogs, and by a significant margin. Horses weren't domesticated until around 6,000 years ago. Dogs were already living alongside humans when we were still thousands of years away from working out how to grow food. This wasn't an agricultural strategy. This happened deep in the Stone Age, probably in multiple places at once, long before anyone had figured out what to do with a wheat field. Which raises the obvious question, how? And this is exactly where the romantic version of the story completely collapses. The classic telling goes something like this: a bold, prehistoric human discovers a litter of wolf pups, brings them home, raises them with care, trains them up, and creates loyal hunting companions. Lovely, touching, almost entirely wrong. Here's something the story never accounts for. Wolves are not domesticable as adults. You can raise a wolf pup from the moment it's born, give it warmth and food and affection, and it will still be, at its core, biologically a wolf. The instincts are still there. The danger is still there. The wolf wants are still there. Zoos have understood this for centuries. Wildlife sanctuaries know it well. The idea that some ancient human simply willed wolves into domestication through patience and determination is exactly the kind of thinking that results in someone getting seriously bitten. So if humans weren't responsible for this, what actually happened? The leading theory right now, the one with the strongest scientific backing, and also the one that makes the most intuitive sense, is that wolves domesticated themselves. Read that again. The wolves chose this. Here's how it worked. As humans became more effective hunters, they started producing something no other predator in the ecosystem was generating at any real scale: consistent, dependable garbage. Leftover bones, discarded scraps, animal parts nobody wanted. For an opportunistic scavenger like a wolf, that's essentially the equivalent of a Michelin-starred restaurant materializing in your neighborhood. So certain wolves, not all of them, just some, began drifting toward human camps, hovering nearby, waiting for scraps. And the critical detail here is which wolves were doing this, not the dominant, aggressive ones. Those wolves had no interest in humans whatsoever. The ones edging closer to the firelight were the slightly less fearful ones. The curious ones, the ones whose stress response around these terrifying spear-carrying fire wielders was just a little bit lower than average. And those wolves got fed. The aggressive ones who kept their distance had a harder time sourcing food and produced fewer offspring. Over many, many generations, this created a selection pressure that nobody designed and nobody anticipated. The wolves nearest to human camps were, by definition, the calmest ones, the most tolerant, the most inclined to approach rather than flee. Their pups inherited those tendencies. And so did their pups. Natural selection, operating with zero human intention behind it, was quietly steering wolf behavior in one very specific direction, toward us. Now here's where something genuinely strange enters the picture. Something scientists didn't fully understand until a Soviet geneticist named Dmitri Belyaev ran what might be the most fascinating and underappreciated experiment of the entire 20th century. Belyaev was working in Soviet Russia during the 1950s, which means he was conducting science under conditions that could be charitably described as hostile. Genetics had been labeled a bourgeois pseudoscience by Soviet authorities at the time, a sentence that deserves a moment to fully land. But Belyaev, who was genuinely exceptional, found a way to continue his research by framing it as a study of fox breeding for the fur industry. What he was actually doing was selectively breeding silver foxes. And the only trait he was selecting for, the only one, was tameness. Each generation, he assessed the foxes for how they responded to human presence and bred only those showing the least fear and aggression. Nothing else was being selected for. That was the entire criteria. What happened next was extraordinary. Within just a few generations, decades, not millennia, something deeply strange began happening to the foxes. They didn't simply become friendlier. They began changing physically. Their ears went floppy. Their tails started curling upward. Patches of white and brown appeared in their previously solid silver coats. Their faces became rounder. Their skulls shifted in shape. Their reproductive cycles changed. They started vocalizing differently. They began actively seeking out human attention and making eye contact. They started behaving like dogs. Nobody instructed them to do any of this. Belyaev hadn't selected for a single one of these physical traits. He had only selected for tameness. But selecting for that one behavioral quality had somehow triggered a cascade of physical and behavioral changes that turned the foxes into something weirdly, uncannily familiar. What Belyaev had stumbled into, and what researchers are still working to fully map out today, is what's now called domestication syndrome. The idea that certain genetic pathways governing tameness and low stress response are linked, at a deep biological level, to a whole range of other physical and developmental characteristics. Select for friendliness and floppy ears, arrive uninvited. Select for calm and you get spotted coats you never asked for. The full package of domestication is stranger and more complex than anyone had anticipated. And crucially, this experiment demonstrated that it doesn't require thousands of years. Under strong selection pressure, the fundamental nature of a species can shift dramatically across just a small number of generations, which means the wolves hanging around ancient human camps may have started exhibiting dog-like traits far more quickly than previously assumed. But here's a question that doesn't get asked loudly enough. What did humans actually do when the wolves started getting friendlier? Because this was never a one-way street. The wolves changed, yes, but human behavior had to shift as well. At some point, some ancient person had to make the decision, conscious or not, to not hurl their spear at the wolf sitting near the fire, to conclude that this creature was tolerable, possibly useful, maybe something else entirely. And the evidence suggests this played out differently across different regions. There's compelling genetic evidence that dogs were domesticated more than once in more than one place. East Asia, the Middle East, and possibly Europe all carry genetic signatures suggesting independent domestication events, meaning the encounter between wolves and humans wasn't a single remarkable moment in time. It was a recurring pattern, a repeated tendency for these two species to find each other genuinely useful. And once humans worked out that a semi-tamed wolf could be remarkably helpful, alerting them when predators approached, assisting on hunts, functioning as a living early warning system, the relationship accelerated. Now there was active pressure from the human side. Keep the friendly ones. Feed them more. Let them come inside. Begin, in some small way, intentionally selecting for preferred traits. The wolves that got along with humans survived better in human company. The humans who kept wolves survived better in the wild. A co-evolutionary partnership formed, not because anyone drew up a plan, but because it worked spectacularly well for both parties. Now let's talk about what domestication actually does to a brain. Because dogs are not simply wolves that learned good manners. They are cognitively different from wolves in ways that are genuinely remarkable. One of the most striking differences involves how dogs respond to human gestures. If you point at something, a dog follows your finger. A wolf doesn't. Even wolf pups raised from birth by humans, intensively socialized, won't reliably track a pointing gesture. But a domestic dog puppy, even one with minimal human exposure, will look exactly where you're pointing. This isn't a behavior dogs learn. It's genetic. Dogs have been shaped across thousands of generations to read human communicative signals in a way that no other animal on Earth can match. Dogs make eye contact with humans in a way their wolf ancestors never would. In wolf society, sustained direct eye contact is a dominance challenge. It signals an imminent fight. But dogs evolved to hold your gaze, to look to you for information, to read human faces as meaningful. And when a dog looks into your eyes, both your brains release oxytocin, the bonding hormone, the same one that flows between a mother and her newborn. You are literally undergoing a chemical bonding process with your dog through eye contact, and they are doing the same with you. In one of evolution's stranger plot twists, a carnivore that by all reasonable logic should want to eat us has been biologically rewired to love us instead. Dogs also possess a facial muscle that wolves simply don't have, a tiny structure above the eyebrows called the levator anguli oculi medialis. When a dog activates it, their face shifts into an expression that reads as sad, soft, and irresistibly puppy-like. It's the muscle behind the classic puppy dog eyes look, and it appears to have been directly selected for over thousands of years of domestication because it works on humans. It makes us want to protect them. It triggers a sense of responsibility for their well-being. Dogs inadvertently evolved a biological mechanism for manipulating human emotions, and it is remarkably effective. You thought you were the one choosing your dog. Your dog's ancestors spent 10,000 years evolving specifically to make you want to choose them. By around 10,000 years ago, just as humans were beginning to experiment with agriculture and settle into permanent communities, dogs were already deeply woven into the fabric of human life. We know this because dogs begin appearing in human burials from this period. Human graves containing human remains also contain dog remains, not as food offerings, but as companions. Some of the oldest confirmed human dog burials show the dog placed carefully alongside the person, sometimes with a human hand positioned over the animal's body. These were people who had shared their lives with dogs and wanted them present in death as they had been in life. Sit with that for a moment. The very first domestic relationship in human history was one of genuine companionship. Not purely functional. not merely utilitarian, something that crossed into what we might actually recognize as love. In a world defined by relentless physical hardship, brutal survival conditions, and life expectancies that would make a modern person's eyes water, people were investing emotional energy in their dogs, mourning them, burying them with care and intention. This is among the oldest impulses we have archaeological evidence for, and it hasn't stopped. Somewhere right now, someone is spending money they probably shouldn't on a ridiculous tiny coat for their ridiculous tiny dog, and feeling completely at peace with that decision. The emotional logic hasn't changed in 15,000 years. So what came after? Because wolf tolerates humans, receives scraps, becomes slightly less wolfish, is only the opening chapter. What follows is one of the most dramatic biological transformations in the history of life on Earth. Once that initial domestication was underway, humans took control of the process. The natural selection pressure that had started everything, select for tameness, get dogs, was replaced by something far more deliberate, intentional human breeding. And humans, it turned out, had an extraordinary appetite for variety. Over the following several thousand years, dogs were bred for specific roles: hunting, herding, guarding, pulling sleds, fighting in wars, sitting on the laps of aristocrats who apparently had considerable time on their hands. Different sizes, different proportions, different temperaments, different instincts. The genetic variation contained within the dog genome was drawn upon to produce a range of body types and behavioral profiles unlike anything else in the animal kingdom. The pace of this diversification is astonishing. In roughly 15,000 years, essentially nothing in evolutionary terms. Humans produced everything from the Great Dane to the Dachshund, from the greyhound built purely for speed to the bulldog, which is shaped like a deeply melancholy loaf of bread and somehow still has the energy to be a whole personality. The wolf body plan, sleek and efficient and refined across millions of years of natural selection, was essentially disassembled and reconstructed in hundreds of different configurations, each one reflecting a particular human need, preference, or at some point apparently just a passing fancy. The modern dog breeds we recognize today are, in fact, quite recent. Most were formally defined during the 19th century, during a period of intense enthusiasm for controlled breeding that produced what were termed breed standards. Precise specifications for how a dog of a given breed should look and behave. This is when dog breeding shifted from, "I want a dog that's effective at hunting," to something considerably more baroque. The Victorian era took a 10,000-year project and turned it into a competitive discipline. Which brings us, inevitably, to the present and to the genuinely strange relationship we now have with these animals. Because dogs today occupy a position in human society that no other animal comes remotely close to. They live inside our homes, they sleep in our beds, they appear in our wills. There are dogs with their own social media followings, their own merchandise, their own birthday celebrations. Somewhere in the world right now, there is a dog with a quality of life that surpasses most humans in recorded history, and it has absolutely no awareness of this, because it just located a sock on the floor, and the sock is the most fascinating object it has ever encountered. We spend more money on pet care than many countries allocate to education. We experience genuine grief when our dogs die, grief that neurologically and emotionally mirrors what we feel when we lose human family members. Because as far as our brains are concerned, that's more or less what they are. We make medical decisions for dogs that we sometimes won't make for ourselves. We train them, talk to them, apologize to them, ask them how their day went, fully aware they can't answer, and somehow feel certain they understood anyway. None of this was planned. None of it was anyone's intention. A wolf started scavenging near a fire, was slightly less afraid than its siblings, had pups that were slightly less afraid than typical, And 15,000 years later, someone is paying $40 for artisanal grain, free salmon, based dog food. Evolution is patient. Evolution is also hilarious. But here's what I want to leave you with, because I think this is the genuinely extraordinary thing sitting at the heart of this whole story. In virtually every other case of animal domestication, humans were clearly the party in charge. We captured animals. We penned them. We bred them deliberately for our own ends. Their meat, their milk, their labor, their hides. The relationship was largely one, directional. We needed something. They provided it involuntarily. Dogs are different. From the very beginning, dogs were participants in their own domestication. They approached us. They adapted to us. Their brains evolved to understand us in ways that remain unique across the entire animal kingdom. And we, in turn, adapted to them neurologically, emotionally, culturally. We changed too. Researchers have found evidence that human populations with dogs performed better in certain survival contexts. Dogs provided warnings. Dogs assisted on hunts. Dogs may have contributed meaningfully to human success as we expanded into new environments. There is a genuine scientific argument, not a fringe one, a serious one, that dog domestication was a significant factor in human success as a species. That without dogs, the arc of human civilization could have looked measurably different. We didn't simply create dogs. In some meaningful sense, dogs helped create us. That wolf that crept toward the firelight 15,000 years ago, in search of scraps, wasn't just making a strategic calculation about food. It was beginning, in the slow, unconscious way that evolution operates. A partnership that would outlast every empire, every language, every civilization that has risen and collapsed in all the time since. A partnership that, against all biological logic, turned two very different creatures into something that feels, to both of them, something like family. So the next time your dog falls asleep across your feet or stares at you with that preposterous yearning expression while you eat dinner, or completely loses its composure with joy at the sound of your keys in the door, just remember that is 15,000 years of mutual evolution expressing itself. That happiness is ancient. That bond was built slowly, accidentally, and at considerable cost to the rational decision-making of wolves everywhere. It was worth it for them, and honestly, it was worth it for us too.